Hello, and welcome to another episode of Commander's Corner. I'm JadeXyan, and I'm here today with Captain Benzie,
Ahoy!
Gensilos,
Hello, hello.
Davo,
Hey, how's it going?
and Jeffrey.
Hey.
Two guests this week?
Indeed, two guests this week.
In fairness, we say this week, but it has been a couple of months since our last episode, so yeah, I suppose doubling up does make sense.
Indeed. Have to make up for that lost time, So let's begin with Jeffrey. For those of our listeners who are living under a rock, who are you? What do you do?
Yeah, sure. So I've been playing Rivals since the beta. I'm a Canadian, so I joined in before the game was released. So this was back in late October. And I've been a part of the Terminus Shores Alliance since about December. Community-wise, I do quite a few things. I streamed pretty much on a regular basis for quite a while back in January, but I haven't really been doing that for some time now. Although I do throw in a stream here and there. More what I'm involved with lately has been Rifle, which I know we're going to talk about a little bit later. But the main thing I've been focusing on is the competitive scene in Rivals. So that's basically what I'm trying to do, as well as bring a professional casting element to the game.
Indeed, we will get to Rifle later. I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about there. But in the meantime, how about you, Davo? Who are you and what do you do?
I'm in the order. I've been playing since the alpha. I try to do whatever I can to bring the community together. I made a website, rivalspvp.com, that I'm trying to get more people to be a part of. Not just me working on it by myself, but try to bring the community together. Make a forum, try to get people to discuss the game, and just really raise the population of the game more.
And how can people contact you if they're interested in getting involved with the website?
The website itself is a forum. Anybody can sign up to it and join, make posts. I'm on there a lot, so I'll see your message if you go there, for sure.
So I'm intrigued. Davo, you say it's a thing for the community to come together and sort of work for the community side. What's the actual vision for this website? What's the full goal?
At the moment, I've been working with Jeffrey and the guys at Rifle. We're going to try to bring more content to the site. For now, I've been posting the latest patches that we've had, news like the lack of vanity items, just ideas that come to my mind, and it's open for discussion for anyone. And that's basically it. Still trying to work
So sort of a community hub.
Things going, get it off the ground,
Okay.
Yeah, I know we have a lot of things already, like the Reddit and the Discords, and I just figured it'd be nice to have a little place where everything's hard set and you don't have to scroll everywhere and all over the place to find things.
So, I suppose the first thing we should probably address, what with this being a Rivals podcast and all, is that whole rumor going around that the game has died.
Oh boy. This is just one of those topics.
And didn't someone make a video about that recently?
I think someone might have, but I'm not sure anyone watched it.
Cheers, guys. I didn't want to be the one to say it, but yes, I did actually put out a video exactly on this topic. I'm not going to tread like the whole thing over and over again, but at the same time, I don't want to say, "Hey guys, stop listening to the podcast." So yeah, that's been one heck of a topic. We've gone from like having Dance and Nivmet and all the guys in the community Discord all the time. The Twitter has just gone radio silent. The Facebook account has gone nearly silent, although you were saying there was actually a post up there recently.
Yeah, there was. They posted a GIF of, or is it GIF? I don't know.
Oh my goodness, we're going to be here all day if you do that.
GIF, move on.
Right, so a GIF was posted that Real Sud posted on Reddit where it shows a Phantom taking down 7 Banshees consecutively. Just saying, look at how Phantom deals with Banshee. Do you think it's this good, or something? Or do you hate dealing with Banshee? Here's a great image to look at, something like that.
So not overly much from the developers directly, then just sort of like a repost of a GIF. Okay, fair point. So yeah, the point is that ultimately things have gone very quiet on EA's front with the game, and that's led a lot of people to, I mean, certainly, come on, look at EA's history. You know, these guys have cancelled games left, right, and centre, closed studios down, all this kind of thing. We know that Rivals didn't do as well as they wanted to. They openly admitted that at the start, that marketing at the launch had been a bit problematic. So I get why people were scared by this. You know, it is a situation where you kind of look at it and go, oh God, has this been cancelled? Are we all about to lose one of our favourite games? And the video, what the basic stuff I went through is that I don't believe so. I really don't believe so. I think that ultimately we've got a case where several staff contracts are ending at once, with people like Nivmet and Dance leaving Redwood simply because of how California employment law works, which is basically they're all hired on part-time and they can't have that contract refreshed. So we've just got a bit of a rough patch whilst new staff are being hired to replace them, and we've got the new guard stepping in. Also, just possibly even slowing down the game because people complaining that new unit every 2 weeks, new balance patch every 2 weeks. You know, it's hard to level everything up and keep on top of all of that, I guess. I don't know. My thoughts.
Yeah, I generally agree, especially with that last point. You look at the amount of tournaments being run now, and you'll notice that we certainly have them a bit more often and a bit more consistently right now, and that's because you aren't getting those new units every 2 weeks to interrupt that flow. So in some ways, this has actually been kind of a good thing. That said, never a good idea to lose your community manager. Makes a lot of people worry, and I don't blame anyone for thinking the game might be dead, but I think we're gonna see more in the coming days that'll prove it's still alive and kicking. It's just worth remembering that for most games, especially EA games, the amount of dev contact we've had in the past is a huge exception to the rule. People like Nivmet and Kyle and Belovin generally aren't people who would have come around
And
in another
that's
game.
a really good point. Yeah, we have been spoiled.
Right. Command and Conquer games have a beautiful history, even within EA, of interaction with the fans, and Rivals has been no different.
Indeed. But with new devs coming on board, like, I won't be shocked if we only hear from community managers. I'm not saying that will happen, but that's what I expect from EA, you know?
I think everybody expects a few things from EA.
I mean, I guess it's also worth at this point addressing sort of the elephant in the room here as well, which is that let's be fair, there have been a couple of quite big leaks recently, so I think there's also a definite EA tightening their belt, and just sort of looking at that situation so that they're not leaking stuff too early.
I agree with mostly what you guys have said. Like, I don't have much else to add because you're right. The front-facing devs going away really hurt the community perception of what was going on with the game because they're in constant communication with us, and to go from having all that communication to literally nothing, just that contrast really made it feel like what's happening here? Like there can't be anything going on. And I have to agree with you, Jade. Like as far as the contact we have had, I think it's been a real blessing for sure. Most games I've been involved in, besides Command and Conquer games, don't give you that type of interaction. The one I think of is Hearthstone, for example. And although they do communicate and talk to the community, it's not to the extent where you can directly contact the devs and actually share your ideas with them. Granted, the Rivals community is a lot smaller, but having said that, I think it was just a real blessing for us. But yeah, to go to having all that communication to nothing really felt bad. But it's not a really good indicator of what's actually happening because that was just a business decision that they had to make at some point. And as a result of that, we're not seeing anything going on, but we're still seeing patches going through. We're still seeing bugs being fixed, although, at a much slower pace. There's still more stuff to come, I have to imagine. So there's lots of things to indicate that the game still is going to be developed and things are still going to continue to happen.
Oh yeah, I mean we even have Redwood sponsoring a tournament now, so clearly someone is there managing things.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually been one of my biggest points when people say to me, like, is it dead? Is it dead? It's like, well, before the whole rifle thing, which I know we're coming to, we keep alluding to it, and I know we're coming to it. We've got the people here to talk about it. But even with MGL, Mobile Gaming League, have recently started running tournaments as well for Rivals. I just don't think that, when people say, oh, is the game dead? The community side of things has never been stronger. You've got people like Davo running up a really cool website. The Reddit is still pretty active. The Discord is still pretty active. There are plenty of people in the game still, and if you look at the well, not concurrent, that's the wrong word. If you look at the download ratings in Google Play, they are still climbing. There are new people still joining. I don't know what the retention rates are, but I just think it's premature to start screaming, we're dying, when there's so much cool stuff happening still. It's just not new stuff being added into the game constantly.
I also think people like us are a minority. There are a lot of people that just like to start their game up, don't care about what's going on behind the scenes. I think we, like I said, are a minority. We do care. We do look for any news and every news we can hear. And a lot of people, they just like to start up the game and play, you know?
Oh yeah, I have 3 family members who play this game that no one here knows because they don't come on the Discord and they don't talk on the Reddit. They just play the game.
Exactly. Yep.
But anyway, I suppose we've alluded to it enough. We should probably get to talking about some tournaments that have been happening. I suppose we should talk about the big news first. Jeffrey, I know you've been working with Rifle a bunch, and that you're getting EA sponsorship for the next one. So, what does this entail exactly?
Yeah, it's been really exciting, and I should clarify, it's not actually EA sponsoring us; it's Redwood specifically, the
Well, part
developers
of EA.
themselves. Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, technically that's true, but yeah, so it's been really, really exciting. I'm not even entirely sure how it all happened. I wasn't the one who initiated the contact with Redwood to make this happen. It was somebody else, so I don't even know the backstory of how we came to make this possible. But I remember the day that I got up and I saw a message in my inbox that said, "Hey, we've got a Redwood sponsorship," and I could not believe it. I really couldn't, because as we were just talking about, the lack of contact didn't make it seem like that was a possibility. Even when we did have community managers, I remember we had reached out to them and said, "Hey, is there something you can do for us?" And the message at the time was no. Basically, this is not something we can do. And so something has changed. I'm not sure what, but all of a sudden they said, okay, well, let's do this. And it's been really exciting. It's something that I've wanted to see for a really long time, because at the very beginning they said, okay, we're going to make this into an esports game. And to me, that makes it sound like they're going to be hosting tournaments. They're going to be doing, sponsored events. They're going to have in-game prizing for community tournaments and things like that. Or at the very least, they were going to host their own tournaments, which they didn't do. So, like we've been talking about, how this lack of contact has actually created this environment where community has come forward to provide the content that people are looking for. Yeah, like Benzie, you said that it's basically not in-game content we're getting; it's out-of-game content that we're getting now. And I think personally, that's some of the best content you can get. Seeing this stuff like Rifle, and there's other tournaments going on too, like Bandito's got a tournament. There's also going to be, I think the RTL's going on right now, so there's that as well.
Yep, Rival Team League's still there.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. The tournament scene has never been better than it has been, and that's really the most exciting thing. And now that we have this sponsorship deal, that's really big too. It's actually saying, hey, like, we care about you guys. We want to see this come forward. Let's make it happen.
Oh yeah, and it's a huge sign that things are still going forward at Redwood, because, like, that sponsorship thing, I know that they started working on that after Coda started bugging sponsorship for the Flamer Festival way back in January, you know? So it's nice
Oh,
to see
yeah.
that come to fruition.
No kidding. Yeah, I do remember the Flamer Festival too, and that was such a long time ago. And the resources that we had to pull in order to make that whole thing work, like if you remember, we didn't even have custom matches at the time.
Yeah.
We had to put people into a specific alliance to make it happen. Like it was madness making that work logistically, but we did. We did. So that's interesting. That was back in January, I believe.
Yeah.
Definitely shows the dedication that people go through to make things work.
Yeah, don't you know, Command and Conquer fans typically are the best at that when it comes to getting the old games working or getting the new games figured out.
Yeah, they've only built how many servers to run these old games now? No.
It's a beautiful thing.
Indeed. I'm going to have to admit, I haven't been tracking Rifle closely enough, so I don't exactly know who won the last two Rifle tournaments. But I will say that I know the first Rivals Team League went very well, and that Scrappy one, which I suppose isn't much of a surprise considering you had me, Alicia, Bike Rush, Nick Cool, and like 3 other people who are in that team.
Yeah, it's a pretty stacked team.
Just a little. I mean, at the time, we were looking at this, we were going, oh, Blade's grabbing all the Terminus Shores people. Well, I guess I'll grab Alicia and Bike Rush and we'll make a go of it. And then it was just like, oh no, let's just not lose. Ever. Might have overdid that one. But in any case, it was a fun tournament, and it's nice to have more of the long form thing. Who's been winning Rifle these days?
So the first tournament was won by Blade, and then the second one was won by I think it's the other way around. It was Alicia and Blade were the two champions of the last two tournaments.
Of course, Alicia had to win at least one.
Oh, of course.
Mhm.
I do believe that at every tournament is contractually obligated to let her win at least one. It's why we have to host another Flamer Festival type thing so that she can actually win one. It's important. But no, I'm glad to hear that Blade got one out though as well. Because I know he's been close in a lot of tournaments before, but he's never quite gotten there. At least in the bigger, more publicized tournaments.
Well, yeah, in the Rivals Team League, I'm trying to remember who it was that knocked their team out, but the story he told me was that basically he couldn't play his match, and I think it was Nukin was their sub, had to fill in, and then he ended up not winning his set, so they ended up getting dropped out, which was surprising.
Ouch. Yeah, not a good thing to have happen. Especially in such a long-term format. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, with Rifle, my only interaction was sort of helping to set up the first one, and doing some of the casting. We had a lot of difficulties in getting that first one set up, but it went well, and obviously from that was born the second one. What with my personal difficulties recently with employment, internet, power, and that here in Zimbabwe, and me heading back to the UK for a couple of weeks. I kind of ended up dropping off of their radar for the next 2 or 3. So I'll be interested to see how this one goes, especially now that, as you said, they've got the Redwood sponsorship. That's huge. That's huge. But okay, so with the tournaments going the way they are, obviously, you mentioned earlier, Jade, that part of what has allowed the tournament scene to flourish is that we've had a little bit less content pushed frequently. There's been that sort of little pause between content patches. So I think that brings us quite nicely to looking at the last balance patch and what that has now done for the current meta and where things stand. I mean, what are your thoughts on this one? This is the September the 12th update. I think we've got a copy of the document here.
Talk about the game not being dead. Balance patch a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was an interesting one.
Yeah, this is our first balance patch without Niv. And let me tell you, I'm a little mixed on this one personally.
It's kind of light, but it's every single thing that I've seen in the patch notes seems to be significant.
Yes and no. Everything looks significant from a distance.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a lot of bark and not much bite, I think, is what Jade's trying to say. That a lot of it looks like, wow, that's a huge nerf, and it's like, it's not a nerf in the right direction. Or, wow, they've really buffed that unit in a way that does nothing.
Well, in fairness, there are 2 big changes that actually made a difference, which is that Banshees cost 60 again, and Venoms move slower. I think those are the 2 biggest changes.
I don't know. I think Grenadiers are finally playable? Question mark?
I mean, I never stopped playing them since they came out, so I don't.
I know this has been my constant thing. Every patch, pretty much. I think it is literally out of all of the patches since Grenadiers landed, all but maybe 2 of them have had Grenadier buffs. And I explicitly remember doing that intel report and getting extremely excited about Grenadiers and being like, these are amazing. And then they came out in live, and I'm like, they're still amazing. And then they buffed them, and I'm like, they're even more amazing. And they keep buffing them.
At this point, it's Rivals tradition that if you have a patch, you have to buff Grenadiers in some way.
And give Nod more nerfs than GDI.
Well, that's not true. You can give Nod more buffs than GDI and nerf them less. It's just those buffs have to be on units that no one is using and isn't going to use even after you buff them.
Like Kane.
Exactly.
I'd like to take a point here, actually. When I did the video for this balance patch, I sat there and I looked at that Kane buff, and I said, this is going to do nothing. And sure enough, Kane is still utter garbage. I get the point now that, like, poor old Kane has just been one joke after another, whether it was how bad he looked in the launch trailer or how amazingly broken he was in the pre-alpha, when you could have up to, you could have multiple of the obelisks up, to now just being an utter laughingstock. Is there a way you can even fix Kane other than remove?
Absolutely, there is. The thing is, you have to do a larger change. The obelisk has to come down in cost to something actually reasonable, and then you have to balance around that cost. The other thing that you alluded to is you're talking about how, oh, Kane in pre-alpha was so overpowered for this very tiny period of time. And the thing is, when you actually look at the meta then, think of all the things that didn't exist. The biggest thing I can think of is air decks. Nobody played air.
Yeah,
Stealth tanks
absolutely
cost
agree.
80, so anyone who did play air got shut down by stealth tanks. And just generally, not only did Kane get nerfed once from that point, he got nerfed the first time, and then got a second completely unnecessary nerf after that nerf.
It's kind of the flame tank story all over again, isn't it? And I'm not going to get in on this one because I know people listening are going to go, "Oh God, here goes Benzie with his flame tanks and Widowmakers." But you get my point. You get my point.
For context, I've only cut Benzie's flame tank story out of every single time he's mentioned it now.
Damn.
He was going to make the last Commander's Corner episode, but then Benzie wasn't there, so we ended up not doing it, and now here we are. So
Yeah. I mean, they got a buff. Not a buff that was any use, but they got a buff.
the HP buff on the obelisk is fine. The problem is you place down a 130 cost structure, it sits there, it kills maybe one pit bull, and then your opponent either avoids it or overwhelms it with an infantry.
Ooh.
I'll tell you what hit me the hardest. I don't know if it's the last patch or the patch before, but Scarabs being 40 costs now, I feel that was a big blow.
Oh yeah, that was Niv's last patch, so the one before this one.
Especially when 20 costing units can take it out without, you have to walk away from a fight in order to save them. You don't really have the option to defend them.
Yeah, the thing about Niv's last patch, and I don't blame Niv for this at all, is it was very much a safety patch. It's like, look, these are the units that are causing slight issues at different levels of play. And this is my last patch. So for the new balance devs, I'm going to put it in a safe place where they don't have to deal with something running rampant right off the bat. And from that understanding, I see why Scarabs were increased to 40. But darn, do I just want Scarabs to be actually playable.
I have no problem playing with them. I know they're a risky unit and you have to set them up, but I just feel, especially if you could just put 2 10 cost units, I feel the only people that are making out on top for that are people that don't run the 10 cost units. They can just they just die so quick. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, which is why they got their nerf, because all the lower leagues are tech. There aren't a lot of rifles running around. But I do hope they'll either come back down in cost or get some sort of rework so they're a little less oppressive in lower leagues. But I've been hoping that since the game launched, so, But yeah, otherwise, to touch on what you were saying about Grenadiers, yes, this buff does make a difference in exactly one matchup, the one with chem buggies. Now they win ever so slightly better than they did before.
And now the chem buggies have been nerfed as well in the same patch. Yeah, it's now gone from, Grenadiers slightly beat chem buggies to now Grenadiers consistently beat chem buggies.
Yeah. Otherwise, honestly, I mean, okay, there is one other unit that actually made a difference, which is I have no idea why they dropped Scavenger Speed, it's like the worst thing you possibly could have nerfed on them because now they have trouble collecting money.
Yep, exactly what I said on this point. Congratulations, you've nerfed them in a way that actually stops them doing the one job they're supposed to do. But I don't want to crap all over this patch. I don't want to sit here and just go, oh no, this patch is terrible, it's awful, what on earth is this new dev doing? I see why they're kind of doing most of the bits and pieces. I get the feeling that Niv kind of left some notes on what to look at and what to expect. I just think,
Yes.
yeah, of all of them, the scavenger one, I kind of get the feeling that a couple of guys put it in the comments section on that video who asked for all of this. This really does feel like lots of people complained, so we're just doing what they asked us to do.
In a way, for me, it's more of a, okay, you successfully picked out everything I want balance changes on, and then you picked all the wrong changes to do to those things. But I see where they're coming from. And I do hope the next patch is basically this patch, but with completely different changes to all of these things.
I think Nod suffers a lot because there's so many units that give them buffs, and it's hard to balance out. I think you got for infantry, you have the fanatics, and with the confessors, and if you boosted them, it'd probably be really ridiculous. But I think that's why they suffer a lot of these.
The way I've always looked at it is that Nod ultimately has lots of specific units. Nod tends to have units that do one thing exceptionally well, but are very, very weak to a group of units. GDI tends to have more all-rounder. Like they're a little bit more stocky, so they're not as weak to so many things, and they tend to be able to do decent amounts of damage to various things. This means that when you come up against a competent Nod player who knows what they're doing, they can steamroll. They can steamroll an average GDI player. And Nod Tech, GDI Tech is it's what I'd refer to as in a very balanced state, in that most of it is overpowered as per all tech, but it's not so bad. It's counterable, but it does decent damage. Nod Tech again has very specific counters, but does extraordinarily well against specific things. Like, if your deck is weak to rockworms will trounce all over you. If you don't have any form of air, artillery used to be a problem, this kind of thing. So Nod gets this kind of perception that it's ridiculously overpowered just because it counters very specific things very well. That's my thoughts, at least. Jeffrey, you're being awful quiet. I'd love to know your thoughts on this, especially since you do a lot of shoutcasting.
Well, yeah, I've watched a lot of competitive play, and that's a good example of where there might be some balance issues. Personally, I'm not a fan of the whole that we have to balance for levels thing. I know that's the way the game's designed, but when you see gameplay at equal levels, it really does showcase some of the problems that there are. This balance patch in general, to me, I agree with you, Jade. I think a lot of these units I had personal issues with. Like the ones that really got affected were Drone Swarm, Venom, I would say Scavengers, as well as Banshee. Those are probably the biggest hits. But yeah, so all these units I could see some sort of issue with. The changes, not all of them I necessarily agree with. I do think it's nice to see at least something happening with these units, but to me, it looks like a lot of these changes are playing it safe. So if we look at the Chem Buggy, for example, that's probably the safest one out of all of these. And Benzie, you alluded to this earlier. It looks like a great change, it looks like a significant change, but it's really not. Even though it is a 10% damage reduction, the power of Chem Buggy is in the Chem Cloud, which does 30 damage per second, but it's an AoE type damage, so it applies to an entire squad. And of course, most infantry is a squad based unit, so that means that it's actually multiplying that damage per second. So Chem Buggy's damage is really not in its infantry damage, and so far from what I've seen, this has really done nothing. Fanatics, same thing, that really did nothing. Kane did nothing. Mammoth didn't really do anything at all. Grenadiers did a little bit, not much. And Liang, again, really didn't do much. But yeah, I mean, I'm not crazy about the patch. There were some things I would have liked to have seen. Slingshot, its time to kill is extremely good, and I think that's the reason why it's such a problem. I'm not sure if the right call was to raise its cost. Maybe that would dumpster the unit, but the health change, I'm not too crazy about. And Venom, I think I would have preferred to see a damage reduction versus a speed reduction. I really do feel like one of the hallmarks of Nod is their movement speed, right? That's one of the things that makes them so good. And having movement speed means you get into your matchups sooner, which means you get into defender's position quicker, which means you can control the matchups a little bit easier. And that's part of the reason why, for example, attack bikes are so freaking good right now. And it's also like you talked about scavengers and how they lost their movement speed. That's another problem with them. Then now their main mechanic where they have to be in position to collect cash, that makes it so much harder. We all know how fast lasers move, which is exactly how fast scavengers move now. Even though there is a visual bug in the game that says they're moving at slow, they actually are at average. But yeah, that makes it so much harder to do. So yeah, I would have liked to have seen some different changes, but perhaps Jade, like you were saying, the next patch they may change direction and do something different. I think a lot of these changes were from Nibmet's notes, but I also have seen a lot of these suggestions in the Balanced channel on the main Discord.
To quote Monty Python, I tried to steer clear of that channel. Tis a very silly place. No, I do agree. I agree with what you're saying there, Jeffrey. And with Jade, yeah, 100%. Let's hope that this is just this is my first patch since starting here. You know, like, the new devs have come in. This is their first patch since starting. Perhaps now they can take it, you know, from here. It's sort of that gently dip your toe in the water, try a couple of things. When that doesn't work, get a bit more confidence and try other things. That's my thoughts and hopes, at least.
Yeah, I agree.
The one thing I do want to touch on that you mentioned is increasing slingshot costs. And I have played with more expensive slingshots, and they are still very good. So I definitely think you can increase the cost. Probably not by a lot, though. My bigger hope, though, would be decrease the DPS. They have 2 range, you can protect them. They can take a little longer to kill things. Because right now, even if you're not protecting them, they can almost wipe out a Mohawk before it reaches them.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can wipe out Banshees before they reach them, which is just insanity for a 50 cost unit.
I completely agree. Well, and the one thing that the health change does do is it does change the matchup between Slingshot and Mohawk. And
Yes and no.
well, so Slingshot versus Mohawk before, it took 3 shots from Mohawk, or Mohawk would get 3 shots off before Slingshot would kill it. Now Mohawk gets 4 shots off, which means it reduces it by about 20% health. So Slingshot lives, I think, now with 20% versus 40%. So that's a material change.
Yeah, it matters if you're Jackson boosting.
That's right, yeah.
The problem is it's a 2-range unit, and I can put a unit in front of the slingshot, and then it doesn't matter that the health decreased.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? And that's part of the reason I don't necessarily agree with the health change. For ground units, it makes a difference, but for air counters, it really makes no difference at all.
So, speaking of things like the slingshot, and we've mentioned scavengers, etc., what was the last unit that we covered in Commander's Corner? Because it's been so long, there's got to have been several new releases since then, right?
The 2 big ones that released since we last did this were Scavengers and the MSV. I honestly couldn't tell you what the last unit before those was, though.
I'm just going to double check on my YouTube now, but while I do so, what were your thoughts on those 2 there?
Well, personally, Scavengers, up until this patch, were my favorite unit in the entire game. I don't play Nod, so it's been really problematic trying to get them up to level when I'm not spending anything on Nod. But yeah, they're just a lot of fun to play with. But yeah, so if Scavengers are my favorite unit in the game, MSVs are my least favorite. You're going to hear from a lot of people, probably even a few people here, who say that MSVs are this amazing unit that were completely broken on release, and honestly, I just never saw it. You can overwhelm them with tanks, people. I don't understand the issue.
I suppose the issue is if, like me, you're not actually running tanks, but then again, I've got air,
I'm not
and I
either,
just tend
though.
to shut it down early.
Exactly. The thing about an MSV deck, to actually make it work, is you have to have like 3 different types of counters.
So what exactly is happening with the MSV? I'm kind of out of the loop.
Basically, the only major change it got since release is that they made it so it doesn't increase reload times, because MLRS with it was actually kind of insane, and I definitely don't blame them for that, because I have to admit, when we were personally testing it, I did not think to build an MLRS and then Jackson boost it while it was boosted by the MSV. Never crossed my mind. So definitely understand why that got nerfed. But since then, they see a little bit of play on ladder. I've seen. I don't know tournament-wise if they're seeing much play anymore. Maybe Jeffrey can shed some light on that.
No, you don't see MSV too much in tournament play, and I think a big part of that is because it's a real hit or miss type of deck where if you get it on the right map, it's very dominant, but if you get it on a pretty bad map, it's really not that great. And the pop cap penalty of having to put MSV in your deck, so you're losing a deck slot as well as having extra pop cap, it's a pretty big drawback for using the units. So I think if you have a really good map for it, let's say Castaway is probably the best, then you might see it. But yeah, just because of that, I haven't seen it in competitive play too much.
I mean, I'm still. I tend to do this thing where I sort of, when a new season starts, I dabble, I play with new decks, I don't really climb all that much. It's about halfway through the season that I start climbing, which is super awesome now that we've got those login rewards, because I can tell when halfway through the season actually is. But down in Diamond, Diamond and Masters at the moment, the MSV is still surprisingly common, and I love it because I tend to scout with rifles or militants straight out the gate. You spot an MSV like being built, and it's okay. I'll just send in a Mohawk or laser drones and get rid of that before anything else comes out.
Well, I'm glad to hear seeing some play down there, at least. For me, it was always like going back to what Jeffrey was saying. For me, the thing that would always have gotten it to tournament play is having it boost things other than just vehicles. Like, even if it had to go through a bit of a nerf, the fact that it can't boost your whole deck is really restrictive.
What do you mean, like maybe boosting aircraft?
I would take aircraft boosts. I'd say I'd take infantry boosts, but I'm a little concerned about MGs, so maybe not infantry boosts. But aircraft at least. Like, there's no reason you couldn't boost Talons, Mohawks, etc.
And if you could boost aircraft, the obelisk could be able to shoot aircraft too. I'm still sticking by that.
Jen, you are getting dangerously close there to making Kane viable. That is not allowed back in the corner.
All right.
Poor Kane.
Poor Kane.
Yeah, he's my second favorite commander, if you didn't know that. It hurts me very much.
Yeah, I miss having the bald-headed badass out on the field. Okay, but speaking of Kane and sort of his appearance in the other games as well, we've had a brief couple of updates. I think we saw some screenshots from the Command & Conquer remasters. I know, Jen, you tend to watch that a little bit closer than I do. I just get the occasional pop-up on my Twitter. I saw some beautiful. Obviously, we saw the mobile construction vehicle, and I think we saw a look at what the UI might look like. What are your thoughts on those, and has there been anything else that I've missed since?
Well, from the last time we've had we did our Commander's Corner, they've released a few things. They showed us just more recently. They showed us that brand new interface that they're bringing into the remaster that will allow us to pick and choose missions that we've already completed, and also able to have like a visual list of the missions we haven't played yet, because Command & Conquer has multiple missions depending on what missions you take on the overworld screen. And then before that, they released their first Red Alert remaster render, which was the Telsa tank, and there was a lot of discussion about how authentic do you make the game versus what their original artist's vision was. So they were talking about whether or not to add the little machine gun that's on the render for the Telsa tank onto the actual in-game render. And that actually stems from another conversation they had, because they also they didn't show pictures of it yet, but they announced that they're having a problem with Tesla coils. In that, in the in-game Tesla coils have 2 coils, or 2 coils, while the CGI renders have 3, and that was because the end-game sprites were too small to handle the multiple coils versus what they really wanted to do. And so now they're going to go for CGI coils, or CGI model coils, and that was actually a bit of a firestorm. It was like, how can you change some things and not others? So like, where do you stop? But yeah, it's been a slow drip from the remasters, and I imagine there'll be some more news coming up really soon, because it's been almost a month. Yeah, it's been a little bit over a month since the last update on the UI, and they also said that they're able to basically complete the game now from start to finish without any errors. So they must be getting close as far as functionality.
Yeah, I was unaware Red Alert had any remastering going on whatsoever.
Yeah, they're doing it simultaneously. So both of them, it's planned that both of them are going to be released at the same time.
That is awesome.
Well, they all in some capacity are using all the renders and the same engines and stuff. In case you guys, I don't know if I brought it up last time either, but they're layering the old source code with their Alamo source code, which has been their RTS engine since Universe at War, and they're layering it for the game engine is going to be doing all the game stuff, and their new Alamo engine is going to be handling all the sound stuff.
Should be nice. I'm very much looking forward to hearing Frank Klacky's remasters of all the music.
I was just about to say that.
Long
I'm
time
looking forward to
coming.
that the most.
Like, more than anything else, if I get nothing else out of these games, a remastered soundtrack is more than enough.
Definitely.
Hell yeah, and you acting on instinct.
Oh yeah, he said before in several interviews that he would love to go back and remix those songs, but he just hasn't had a reason to, and he couldn't release them anyway because he doesn't own them. So yeah, I'm pumped too.
Anyone else have any last-minute additions?
Hmm.
Kind of a side effect of Rivals being so quiet is we don't have a lot to talk about.
I just have to say is that I think a lot of the worry of Rivals dying probably comes from the fact that like if it does die, which I'm sure it's not going to anytime soon, but if it does die, I've brought this up many times before, no one will be able to play the game ever again. And I think that's what a lot of people are afraid of, is that they love this game and they don't want to be away from it.
I do just want to say as well that, look, I don't believe Rivals is dying. I genuinely believe, not think, I believe this is just a little quiet patch we've got while things shuffle and get ready to sort of continue onwards. That said, even if playing the worst case scenario here, even if the devs said, right, well, we're not contacting anymore, if the game did start to die out, I just want to point out you can still go onto the Google App Store and remember that horrific Dungeon Keeper mobile fiasco we had like 3-4 years ago, when, oh my goodness.
Oh, that was more like 7 years ago.
That game is still going. It still gets patches. It still gets
Wait, for
security
real?
updates. There are people still playing it. I genuinely,
Wow.
I wanted to check on this. I downloaded it, started playing it. It's a little bit too microtransaction-y for my liking, but it is enjoyable in its own sort of weird way, I guess. But yeah, there are people still playing. There are updates still happening for it. So if EA is still updating Dungeon Keeper Mobile, I'm pretty sure that even in a worst case scenario, Rivals is going to be going for a long time.
Well, that's good. That's actually very reassuring.
That's a hill I'm willing to die on.
I think another big worry too was, without any of the contact, people weren't feeling confident about investing in the game, like purchasing items in game or doing things like that. Like, I think as far as the community content goes, a lot of people are still investing in that. Like, we're still seeing lots of donations and people being generous in that sense. But I think the big concern was that, well, if they're not talking to us and the game's dying, what's the point of me going and spending any money on it? And I think for me that's about the only negative. Now, I don't really know how much revenue the core Discord community brings in. I know we have some people who spend a lot of money within the community, but I have no idea what percentage that actually makes up of the revenue. But much like the missing vanity items in the store, it kind of made it seem like, what's the point? Like, why should I bother spending any money? So seeing this kind of continue on, at least I hope that people will feel like they can spend more money on the game, because I was one of the people that was a bit worried that without that, the game would just die off. But I think that's very reassuring, Benzie, you talking about Dungeon Keeper, because that game was, well, it didn't get received very well for the reasons you mentioned about the microtransactions and the fact that EA was behind it and it was a game that people cherished. So to hear that, the fact that that game is still going on, I think that's very reassuring for Rivals. And actually, Benzie, I know you're involved in other mobile games. Are there any others that are in a similar position? I know a lot of people tend to say like, "Oh, this game's dead," but it's really not. But I think there's other mobile games in similar positions, aren't there?
It's a constant thing actually with a lot of mobile games, and it's kind of a yes and no. So there's a game I play a lot called Gigantic. It's a top-down sort of think it's a bullet hell shooter basically, and it's hard. It is very hard, and it's been out 2-3 months. And the devs announced yesterday that they're shutting it down because it didn't get the response they wanted, and that's heartbreaking because I love this game. And to me, it seems so short-sighted just to say, well, this game didn't get the support we wanted, so we're turning the service off and closing the whole thing down. It's like, just let it play. Let it play. Because there are games out there that, I'm not talking about the PUBGs, or heck, look at how long Clash Royale and Clash of Clans has been going. Yeah, those games are huge, and they've got one heck of a support behind them. But they are old games. If you look at the Shadow Fight games, Shadow Fight 3 is the constant one. Shadow Fight 2 got an update yesterday, despite the fact that it is the previous game. It is still getting updates for the people who are playing it. There are so many games that, despite there being more recent versions or, a newer game has come along, they still get updates. Because the wonderful thing about mobile, and because it is that microtransaction economy, and I know people hate that word, they think of microtransactions as a bad, nasty, evil word. It's not. It's just a different way of monetizing a game. The thing is, when you've got a game that is pay once and that's it, there comes a point where people stop buying the game and it becomes financially unsustainable. The example I'm going to use off the top of my head, Demon's Souls with From Software. They turned the service off for that last year because PS3's long gone. No one's buying Demon Souls anymore. So it's pouring money down a drain to keep that server on. With microtransaction-based games, there are always people coming in who come into a really old game, they're enjoying that game, and they look at maybe one of the skins or something like that, and they go, oh yeah, I'll dump £5 on that. I'll dump 20 quid on that. And people still pay in those really old ones. I think that's one of the big strengths that mobile gaming has, and that's a big feather in Command & Conquer Rivals cap. Think about it. If you're a brand new player coming into Rivals now, you can still drop 200, 300, 400, 500 bucks into this game in order to push yourself up those levels to get into the top tiers quickly. You can still do that, and you'll still be able to do that for a long time, which means it becomes a very financially viable game.
Yeah, the game has a lot of ways for you to spend money coming up through the levels, but once you cap out, I mean, it just feels like it kind of dies off at the moment without vanity items.
True, and I really, really am hoping that they bring, even if they keep it in the cycle. I don't like the cycle. I'm a mad fan of just put everything in the shop and let people decide what they want, but I understand why they did the cycle. It's that fear of missing out.
Artificial scarcity. That's one of my things that I hate.
And there's some technological reasons behind why everything isn't in the shop, too. But
I just hope they get it fixed, because I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with Davo that once people reach a certain point, some of the older players now are running around with level 15 decks. Some of the guys who are free to play have level 15 units, like 1 or 2. Well, okay, 1. Level 13 is completely viable across the board if you were free to play since launch, all this kind of thing. You want something that people can still spend that little bit of money on, and vanity was the way forward on that.
I like to say we have high hopes, though. If you go look in the customizations, you see some units like the Avatar do
Yeah,
have
chem buggies do too.
another option out there, but we just don't have access to it. Either be through the races or yeah, there's a few of them, and I can't wait.
I hadn't spotted these. Quick question on that then. Did I miss it? The Oksana skin, the Tiberium Sun Oksana skin.
No, not yet. Definitely not yet. I'm waiting for it. I think it says in store or in a race. I can't remember which one, but it would definitely be.
Be still my heart.
That's what I mean. We saw it in the patch notes. It was there in the patch notes, and I said, "Oh, I can't wait to get this." Same with Kane, as useless as he'll be, but Fallen Prophet Kane. We still haven't seen that, so
Yes, we
this
have
is
actually.
again further evidence.
Fallen Prophet Kane
Did
was
we?
in one of the bundles.
You're quite right, he was. But okay, the Oksana one. I'm going to stick with the Oksana one here. The fact that there are things like the Tiberian Sun Oksana skin that have not yet featured in game is just proof that this stuff is still there waiting.
Well, I think that's an important point to bring up too, is as far as monetizing the game going forward, that's something that, well, for one thing, they should just collect money on those assets that are just sitting there doing nothing at the moment. But because we have a competitive scene that's starting to rise up, obviously in the competitive scene, there's no levels of play, so they can't monetize that. Having vanity items, if there are players that really just want to play in tournaments and just do equal level gameplay, give them vanity items so they can at least spend some money and support the game that way. Because I see some players who are saying, you know what, I'm done playing on ladder. I actually just want to play in tournaments or just do custom matches. And I think that's something that they should focus on, especially like I said, because we're seeing so many tournaments come into play.
Just about where I'm at, and it's like there are several things that they have released that I missed the first time around. That it's like, well, now I might go back and pick those up if you ran them again.
Yep,
Yeah, like the Arctic White
missed
attack bikes.
those.
Oh, those are so great.
I got those, thankfully, but there's still a lot of other ones that are. A lot of those early races had bugs. You couldn't actually get the skins for a lot of people. Like I missed every single GDI race skin because I just never got GDI race. And GDI is the faction I play.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people missed out on the races, either not making it early enough, and then I guess all the race slots filling up. But a lot of people had that issue.
Oh yeah, like there's a race running right now, and I only have one side of it.
I would love to see all that stuff that came around. Like, I'd love to see all those skins that we've had eventually added into the shop. Okay, forgive me talking about other games here, but Armorjet used to do this really, really well. That you could essentially buy anything in the game directly. It was all there straight out of the bat. You want to buy this particular skin? Bam, it's there. It costs a lot, but you can do it, and it gets rid of the whole loot box thing. You just literally pick it up, and you pick what you want. You pump your credit card number in, bam, you've got the item. But you could also earn it randomly through gameplay, and occasionally they would appear in the store at a massively reduced cost. Put all of the skins in the game up for sale at a fairly high cost. Have all of the emotes and that in there as well. Then just occasionally cycle them through at a reduced cost. The cost that they were, like, what was it, 600 diamonds for the emotes?
Somewhere
1,000
1,000.
diamonds?
I believe it was 1,000.
So say it was 1,000. Make it 1,000 when it comes through the store as a special cycle. But you could also go into the menus and buy them for 2,500, something like that. You've still got the option to buy it, but you have that kind of fear of missing out, as Jen said, that whole artificial scarcity to ramp it up that way, and you get that little, oh, it's on offer. It's on offer. I can actually grab that this time. That would be my way forward.
I agree. Almost any place you go where it says purchase in store should be a link to buy it at a higher cost than it will eventually be in store.
I like the way they did it. I believe it was the Titans when they came out with their skin that you had to do an event for it, and if you couldn't make uh, the basic win, you could have the premium option to if you did far enough to get that skin. I think it was like 2 wins you needed to get the Titan skin with a premium reward, and I thought that was pretty fair too.
Yeah, I liked that. My issue with that is they haven't done it again.
Exactly.
Like, you can't have like if someone started last week the chance they're going to get that Titan skin is nothing, which is just not good.
And I got my purple rockworm and my Arctic Widowmakers, so I'm
I
happy.
missed the Arctic Widowmakers. I did get purple rockworms, though. I really want purple bikes, but they haven't released them yet.
But that's all money-making opportunity, and say what you will about EA, if there's a way that they can make money, they'll do it. So shutting down a game while there are still unused assets, while there's ways to make money out of it, I really don't see it happening at all. And I know I'm driving that point home like pretty hard throughout this entire episode, but damn it, Rivals is not dying. Like seriously, I really don't believe it is.
It's okay. I mean, it's what everyone's talking about, so it's understandable that you would drive it through over and over again here. But I suppose all good things have to come to an end.
Much like I suppose this podcast should have to.
Indeed. It turns out that I actually have to edit these things, and therefore a 4-hour podcast would be a terrible idea for my free time. So
Don't get much of those nowadays.
yeah, still have that child to deal with, huh?
Yeah, it won't go away.
I have a cat now who keeps me up at nights. I understand some of your pain.
Is it 18 yet?
I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. I understand.
See, Jen, there's good news. It doesn't get better. You can just ask Davo. No.
Just get older.
But anyway, let's wrap this up. Starting with Davo, where can people find you?
I have a website, davoonline.com, or you can find me on rivalspvp.com, or you can find me in the Order Discord as well.
Indeed, you are the leader of the order, are you not?
Yes, I am.
So, Jeffrey, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitch at Jeffrey_TV. I do, like I said, I haven't streamed in a while, but I do try to stream every once in a while just to keep the channel up to date. But probably the easiest place to find me would be in the Rifle Discord. I'm probably most active there. And yeah, if anybody wants to come and chat about Rifle, if anybody has any questions or any ideas, definitely bring them on. I'd love to hear them.
I suspect we'll be talking later.
I suspect so.
And then, of course, Jen, I know you're busy, but can people still find you somewhere?
Yes. I haven't been streaming lately. I haven't streamed in months, but I promised that I would be back streaming once things calm down a bit. When Command & Conquer Remastered comes, I'm definitely going to be playing the hell out of that game. I already got all sorts of things figured out with my amazing wife to make sure I have time to do so. So I do have a Twitch. It still has hours and hours and hours of content, fun stuff, fun clips. Twitch.tv/Gensilos. I am on the Discords, the community Discord and the Terminus Discord. If you ever need me for anything, be sure to send a shout out. I usually reply really fast. And if you ever want to play some friendly one-on-one games, I'm also down for that too.
Well, if you ever end up playing any of those 1v1 games, I would love to see them. I'm kind of missing my Gensilos content.
I was sure to save the replays.
Yes, favorite them.
Oh yeah, okay, we'll do.
Benzie, where can people find you?
Well, the most obvious place to find me is, of course, youtube.com/Captain Benzie, all one word, where you'll find, obviously, lots of Command & Conquer Rivals content. I run a bunch of tutorials, both on the units and on gameplay mechanics, though I do need to up some more of those gameplay mechanics. I also do a lot of content on various different mobile games, just sort of preaching everything I can about how awesome mobile gaming can be. So if you're enjoying Rivals or looking for something else to be playing on your phone, that's the best place to look for me. Otherwise, I do hang around the Discords. I don't post much these days, but if you ping me, chances are I'll respond fairly quick. Oh, and Twitter. Always Twitter.
All right. And then, of course, I'm JadeXyan. You can find me around almost any Discord. I'm not quite up to date on being in all the Alliance Discords, but I am in most of them, as well as the community Discord. If you ping me, I will probably respond within a day or so. I occasionally get fairly busy, as has happened these last few months, but I am finally getting time again, so I am around. I'm also on Twitch, twitch.tv/JadeXyan. And yes, I promise I will stream again very soon. Just got a new phone, have been working on the setup.
I'm still waiting to see this replay analysis channel of yours, Jade. Very excited for that.
Oof.
It's just gotten pushed off so much, and now I'm working on that Discord bot and everything, and
I know, but if I didn't mention it, the running joke would stop
this
running.
is true. I would love to do it. I still would. It's just so time consuming to get a replay and break it down. And I've gotten close a couple of times, and then just when I think Rivals is dead and there's not going to be a balance update, they update the balance and wipe all my replays. It's a real pain. But anyway, thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Adios.
See you all later, guys.
Thanks for having me, for sure.
And thanks for having me too.
Always a pleasure.